So we're going to make a loaf of sourdough bread. There are several steps. Your first step is going to be mixing up a Levain into a bowl. You can use a large wooden bowl, a glass bowl, or a metal bowl. It doesn't really matter. And you will have fed your starter and allowed it to double. So at night, you're going to mix this up. You just take your bowl, zero it out from your beautiful active starter. You're going to get 20 grams. That is just not much. That's it. It's like a big heaping tablespoon. That's all it is. Then I'm going to put that down so you can see that. That's it. And then to that, you're going to zero out your scale. And to that, you're going to add 40 grams of spring water. Okay. Just stir that around a little bit. It looks sort of milky. And then to this, you're going to add, and again, zero out your scale. You're going to add 40 grams of bread flour. Stir that up. And like I said, you're going to do this in the evening before you go to bed. This is a 1-2-2 feeding, essentially creating a small offshoot from your main starter. You do a 1-2-2 feeding, 20-40-40, to allow it to grow all during the night, nice and slow. So once you have done that, you're going to cover it during the night, and it's going to grow. 40 plus 40 plus 20 is 100. So when you get up, you're going to have 100 grams of starter, and that's what's going to go in your bread. So in the morning, we will be ready to go. So it's the next morning. The Levain that you mixed up last night, the 20 grams of starter, 40 grams of flour, and 40 grams of water that is not tap water because it has chlorine in it. You're going to get up in the morning and it has grown in volume. It's nice and bubbly, and you're going to have exactly 100 grams. And you know that because you're going to add the 40 plus the 40 plus the 20. So I didn't realize that whenever you mix the amount of flour, water, and starter, when you add those grams up, it's always going to weigh that much. It's going to grow in volume. It's going to get kind of puffy and fluffy and stuff, but it will always be that gram. So I know this is 100 grams. So this is going to be the starter for the bread. We have created a little young offshoot from my mother's starter that I'm keeping in the fridge. Does that make sense? So when I fed my starter and it grew and doubled and got all big and bubbly and everything, this is my mother's starter. I keep it in the fridge, and when I want to bake, I pull out a little bit the night before. So to this, we are going to put this on our scale, and you're going to tear out or zero out your scale. And to this, we're going to add about 305 grams of water. So I'm going to tilt this down. I like to get spring water. Okay, it's about 305. And to this, I'm going to take a Danish dough whisk. The reason I like this is because it has all of these holes that your dough can go through. If you were to use just a wooden spoon, the front and back of it's just going to be coated. It's going to be a big old mess. So you just want to stir this up until it's kind of milky looking. If you'll see there's like little clumps and stuff, you just want to, you're not going to be able to get those gone. Just kind of make it nice and milky. Okay. Always remember to zero out your scale. Sometimes you have to press the button twice, but zero that out. And then to this, we're going to add 400 grams of bread flour. And, you know, I know that some of the big brands of bread flour can be expensive, but apparently there really is a big difference in flour. And if you go to some of the discount stores and you get their flour, I've heard people say it just doesn't do a very good loaf of bread. So I like to stick with the big brands. This particular bread flour has over 13% protein, which is great. When I first started baking, I was using all-purpose flour that I believe the one I used had 12.7% protein, but the bread flour has even more, and I'm getting a much bigger rise. So I do recommend you use bread flour. Okay, so we're going to also add in 50 grams of a whole wheat flour. And it's just going to say whole wheat. It's not going to say whole wheat bread flour. Okay. And then I had already measured that out. See, do you see what I did? I forgot to zero out my scale. Oh my gosh, I've done this so many times. Always make sure between ingredients you zero it out. I'm so glad that I had already measured that out. Okay, now I've zeroed it out. So now I'm going to add, it's so easy to make a mistake, y'all. Now I'm going to add 9 grams of salt. And I've zeroed it out, so I'm not going to do that again. That's good. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this dough whisk. We're done with the scale. We can set that aside. And you're going to just start doing some little short circles here just to get the initial liquid mixed in. And the more you bake, you're going to learn what you want your dough to look like. For the first time recently, I actually added a little bit of extra water. For some reason, my flour was a little more thirsty. My dough looked really dry, and you can do that. It's not going to hurt it. There is a science and math and everything behind sourdough. It's not super subjective, but okay, this dough to me is looking a little bit dry and sticky. So I'm going to clean my Danish whisk off. I'm actually going to add a little splash of water. And the only reason I'm doing this, y'all, is because every day the environment's different. I didn't take all my rings off. Here we go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to wet my hand, and I'm going to get in here, and I'm just really going to squeeze, because see all that dry stuff down on the bottom? You want to get all of that mixed in. And you're just going to squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it. Kind of get it all mixed in. It's really, really sticky at this point. That's okay. Your bowl's a big mess. You just want to make sure that that whole wheat flour, sometimes if you don't mix it in really good, it'll form these funny little dry pockets. So you just want to just do that. And then you got to kind of clean your fingers off. Okay. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of plumbing advice. Do not put this stuff down your sink. You just don't want to put it down your sink. Dry your hands off with a paper towel the best that you can. And then after you've done that, then you can wash it off. But just try to catch as much as you can in a little sink strainer if you can. Because once it gets down in your pipes, It's going to basically turn into concrete. Okay, so we're going to cover this for 30 minutes. I'm using my little handy dandy timer here. And during that time, the flour is going to hydrate. There we go. Use that time to just kind of clean up. So at the end of 30 minutes, we're going to start to do our stretch and folds every 30 minutes, and it's going to need 3 of them. So that can help you when you get up in the morning. You're going to mix your dough. So let's say you got up and did it at 7:30 a.m. It's going to sit for 30 minutes, so that's 8. You do your first stretch and fold at 8, your second one at 8:30, your third at 9, and then at that point it should pass the window pane test, which I'll be showing you, and then you're going to do your bulk rise, and that's going to be 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. So, but your hands off at that point. So, okay, we'll be back here in 30 minutes. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes. It's time to start the stretch and folds. You're going to get your hand nice and wet, and notice how shaggy the dough looks. It doesn't look smooth at all. So you're going to take your wet hand, and I just want to make sure it is really wet, and you're going to go in and pull it all the way up like that. And go around, pull it up. It's amazing how just doing a few of these, the dough starts smoothing out. This is going to develop your gluten. I like to really go around and do it until it starts to resist me. At this point, see, it's hard to even pull it up. So you're going to do your stretch and folds all the way around several times until it starts to resist you. And then that big shaggy mess, look how pretty it is now. So you're going to cover that for 30 more minutes. And your hand's a little dirty. Remember what I said, get a paper towel. That was my 30 minutes going off. Get yourself a little timer. And I also advise getting a notebook and making notes of what time you're doing things in case you forget to set your timer. So we're going to come back and we're going to do a second stretch and fold. Okay, it's been 30 minutes, so now it's time for our second stretch and fold. So it always starts off in a nice ball after you do your stretch and fold. Take my ring off. And you're just going to get your hand wet. And you're going to go in. Stretch it up as high as you can. It's so pretty and smooth. Look at that. It's building gluten right here. This is causing all the strands to get in the right direction, building strength. It's amazing how beautiful. You just get this nice little ball. So once it starts resisting you, you're kind of done there. So we're going to set the timer for 30 more minutes. Cover it up, and we'll come back. Okay, it's been 30 minutes. So now we're going to come in for the hopefully last and third stretch and fold. So we're going to take the cover off, and I'm going to wet my hand. We're going to go in and do a last stretch and fold. It's very resisting at this point. You're not going to be able to lift it up very high. It's already wanting to stay in a little bowl, little ball. Very nice. Okay, so at this point, we're going to see if it's done. We're going to do what's called a window pane test. You're going to pull up a little bit of dough. And remember when we were kids and we would get a rubber balloon and we would stretch the rubber. And here you can almost see my finger and it's not tearing. And so it is done. So it's ready for the bulk rise. And instead of just trying to guess when this dough has doubled, it's kind of hard to tell. So what I like to do is get maybe a little shot glass and put a rubber band around it, pull off about 50 or so grams and put it down in that little glass. You know, the sourdough is going to rise, whether it's in this little glass or in the big bowl, it's going to rise with the same amount of oomph. So all you're doing is you're just pulling a little bit off to gauge how much it has risen. So I'm going to put a rubber band right about there. I'm going to cover this and put it in the oven with the light on, cover this next to it. And when this has doubled, then I know this has doubled. So it's going to take probably 2 to 3.5 hours, I would say. So now on to the bulk rise. So the bulk rise on my sourdough has ended. The reason I can tell that is because I had this tiny little jar in here. We started out at about 40 and we're about up to 80. So I know that it has doubled, which means the dough in my bowl has doubled. This is just such a great trick, y'all. So I'm going to use my little silicone spoon spatula to get that out. And now we're going to do a pre-shape. You do not need to flour your counter. This is where your bench scraper is going to come in handy. So let me bend this down so you can see it better. So you're going to scrape all this out. It's a really nice way to keep your bowl nice and clean. Remember I said, when you wash, don't be putting any of this dough down into your pipes. That's not bad at all. Okay, so you've got this right here. So we're going to do what's called a pre-shape. And y'all, seriously, this is my favorite part of all. You can use one of these bench scrapers. You can do it with your hand, but you're going to come in kind of like down at 4 o'clock and just kind of push it up and come around in a circle and then push it. Come around, push it. It's sticky. Come around, push it. What you're going to do, you're getting it to kind of shape itself into a little ball. I've seen on a lot of videos, they talk about this and they talk about that you're creating tension. And I didn't quite understand what they meant by that. So think about somebody getting a facelift. This outside area, what you're doing is you're tightening it up. And when you cut it with the razor and you do with the lum, and you're going to make that cut before you put it in the oven, you're tightening the skin on the outside and you're going to get a better overall rise. So it's nice and tight. So that is all we're going to do for the pre-shape. You can get a little bit of flour just to kind of put on the top and then cover it. And we're going to leave that for 20 minutes. Okay, the pre-shape has sat for 20 minutes. So now we're moving on to shaping. So at this point, we're going to be putting our dough, after we have shaped it, into the Banneton basket. This is the proofing basket. You can either do an oval shape or a round shape. And my personal preference is the oval, because then you end up with a loaf of bread in that shape. And to me, it's just easier to slice. You get a little bit of a smaller slice. but this is a little bit more traditional. It's called a boule, B-O-U-L-E, and this is called a batard. So I believe this one is about 9 inches. So I'm going to use this one. First thing you want to do is get some rice flour, and you want to really get some rice flour in there. Well, if you don't have any rice flour, you can make it. Just get some dried rice and put it in your blender and let it go until you have flour. So that's about it. I do toss out a little bit of leftover. Okay, so on to the shaping. So what we're going to do, I have put a little bit of flour on the outside. Now I've got a big bubble right here. Oops. So I'm going to kind of pop this little bubble just because I don't want a gassy bubble right on the outside. So there was a little bit of flour here I put. The underneath side is sticky, so we're going to lift it up with the bench scraper and turn it over. Now, this side here is really sticky. I want you to take it and just gently shape it into a little bit of a rectangle. It's not going to be very big, and it is going to be resisting you. So I'm able to get it to about 11 inches. What is that? About 11 by 8. Oh, it smells so good. Okay, so to shape it, you know, there's different ways to do it, but this is how I do it. I take this side and I fold it over to the middle. So this is a little floury, this is sticky. This, fold it over like that. Again, on this end down here, you're going to take your thumbs and press in about 3 inches and then sort of push it away from you and do a roll. Press in, push away, roll. Press in, push away, roll. Press in, push away, roll. Do it. So we've got this. Now, the ends look a bit like a cinnamon roll, so I'm just going to squeeze those together like that. Then here, I like to take my bench scraper, and you know, we talked a little bit earlier about doing those tension pulls that I said it's kind of like giving it a facelift. It tightens that outer skin. I'm going to do that here. Like that. So I'm going to now pick it up and put it upside down into the proofing basket. Now, then you're going to look at it. Do you see any little loose places? Some people do what's called stitching, and that's where they kind of grab the outer edges and bring it in towards the middle. You can do that. That, again, just kind of helps tighten things. I just heard a little bubble pop. That's kind of cool. So, yeah, you're just kind of pulling it together. It's kind of sticky. Like that. That's it. You're going to take a little bit of flour, put a little bit on the outside. Oh, it's so jiggly. Look at that. See that? So put a little bit of flour. Then I'm going to cover this, and he is going into the refrigerator overnight. The reason we do that, it's called a cold retard, and just means that it stops the rising. It does continue to puff a little bit, but for the most part, it's not going to. So it's going to stay in there overnight. You can leave it in there for 24 hours. And what it's going to do is the outside of that loaf is going to form a little bit of a skin. So when you go to bake tomorrow and you go to cut into that skin with the razor, it just cuts better. It holds the cut better. If I wanted to bake this today, I could cover it and set it on the counter for about another hour to an hour and a half, preheat my oven and bake it. But when I dump it on the counter, it's going to deflate a little bit. And when I go to cut it with a razor, it's going to drag. So even though you don't like waiting, I do highly recommend going ahead, putting it covered up, put it in the refrigerator overnight, and then tomorrow you can do your baking. So off to the fridge. Okay, so I finished a pre-shape. I'm going to show you how to shape a round boule that's actually going to have sesame on it. So the pre-shape is done. I have a little bit of flour. I put a little bit of flour at the top. I'll do a little bit more. So we're going to turn this over. And you're going to gently stretch this into a little bit of a rectangle. And just fold one side over the other. And I sort of put my thumbs in here and push in and roll, push in and roll, push in and roll, like that. And then take your bench scraper and just come into it, do a turn and allow it to catch on the counter, and then pull it kind of toward yourself. You can also do this with your hands, just like that. And it's really kind of cool. As you pull it toward you, you can feel it tightening into this tight. Can you see how tight this skin is? It's really amazing. Just pull it toward you. And again, it's forming that tension on the skin. So if you want to put sesame, then what you're going to do is just turn it upside down onto a dishcloth that has the sesame all over it. And then you're going to just sort of gently turn it over into your banneton that already has a little bit of rice flour in it. And that is it. We're going to cover this and put it in the refrigerator, and we'll pull it out tomorrow to bake. Okay, it's the next morning, and I'm dumping the bread out onto some parchment. It was in the refrigerator for about 15 to 18 hours, and now it's time to bake. You want to preheat your oven to 450 with your Dutch oven sitting on a little pan. If you don't do that, it's easy to over brown the bottom of your bread. So the Dutch oven is in there, it's getting nice and hot, and it's time to score your bread. So you're going to take your razor blade, and there's different ones you can get. Just make sure you're changing that blade out because they get dull quickly. I actually just went to the store and purchased some nice quality blades. So you're going to give, over here, you're just going to go in and you're just going to give it a nice, confident score all the way across, just like that. And when this bread bakes, that is the place where it's going to open up. So after I've scored it, I actually like to go in kind of underneath that top layer and just give it a little help. Notice that my blade is literally level with the countertop. Now over here, you can just make some tiny little cuts just using the corner of the blade. This is making a design that is a little bit like a wheat stalk. It's totally up to you. There's so many different ones you can do, and this is just about looking pretty. So that's it. We're going to take the Dutch oven out of the oven, and we're going to set this inside. And if you've got someone who can help, it's great. So very carefully, because this thing is steaming hot, I'm going to drop it down in there, put the lid on, and put it back in the oven where it is going to, it's going to cook for 20 minutes with the lid on. That's the time it's going to grow. Hopefully you get an ear and a belly comes out. After 20 minutes, you remove the lid. It's going to be beige. It's not going to have browns. And for 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how brown you want it to be, that's when the browning occurs. So after it has browned to your liking, go ahead and take it out, dump it on your counter, let it cool for at least an hour. If you can't stand it and you need to cut a piece, you're not going to hurt it. Go ahead and do it. Just use a nice serrated bread knife. So that's about it. Honestly, scoring the bread is the thing that's going to improve with time. When I first started, my loaves weren't very attractive. They weren't opening up. And the more I worked with the score, the more I knew to use a sharp blade and to put it at an angle. Don't ever go straight. Put it at an angle. And the more of an angle, it's going to lift that top layer up off like that. And then it's going to open up like that. So yeah, we'll be getting it out of the oven in about 20 minutes. We'll take the lid off, see how it looks, and another 15 to 20, we'll let it brown up. Okay, it has been 20 minutes at 450. It's time to pull the lid off the bread, and let's see what kind of an oven spring we got. Oh, that's beautiful. We have a nice ear also. So that's going back in to brown up. And we will come back here in about 15 minutes. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes. And the bread is out. It is beautifully brown. You can see where the cut we did allowed it to open up and get that beautiful oven spring. You can see a little bit of the design I did. So this is a nice loaf of bread. Also, it is not burned on the bottom. Adding that little pan in the oven prevents that. So at this point, you just want to put it on your counter and allow it to cool about an hour before you cut into it. After you cut it, what you want to do is get a piece of the saran wrap. Let's say you cut this in first after it's cold. You can just put a little piece of saran wrap over the cut edge and wrap the rest in just a large dish towel like this. And just wrap it all up, and that's how you can store your bread. It's going to last for several days. My favorite way to eat it is to cut a slice, sprinkle fresh minced garlic, Parmesan Reggiano cheese, a little bit of olive oil or avocado oil, and put it in the oven until it's nice and crisp. It is also really good cut with some avocado oil, some either honey or maple syrup, and a lot of cinnamon to make cinnamon toast, and just put it in your toaster oven. So yep, here is a beautiful, beautiful loaf of sourdough bread. It should have a lot of good tangy flavor because we did put it in overnight in the fridge, and that is where it develops that nice sourdough flavor. If you want to, once this is fully cooled, you can double wrap it and put it in the freezer, and it freezes beautifully. But also it makes a great gift. You can walk this over to a new neighbor. So that is it. I hope you try these instructions. It's a great, easy way to learn how to bake sourdough bread. Good baking.